Hey guys, another one take review and the seventh entry in my Rock Hall Reviews series where I talk about one album by each of the current year's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nominees. And today I'm going to be talking about none other than Eminem, who is arguably probably one of the first white rappers to actually have mainstream respect. I mean, even the Beastie Boys, when they started out, got no respect from the music industry and critics. So, I mean, I can not even really count them, but Eminem, he got a lot of respect over the years, and I have sort of a love-hate relationship with Eminem, as in I want to love his music, but I absolutely hate it. And the Marshall Mathers LP is the album that I'm talking about today, and it just it doesn't even do it for me, and it's meant to be his greatest achievement throughout a pretty long career overall, 25 years now, but it just really does not click with me whatsoever. I think one of the biggest reasons that I've never really been able to dig Eminem's music just in general is I've never really liked his presence as a performer. I just think his flow is pretty not unique and kind of weaker compared to other famously aggressive rappers like, say, DMX. And overall, I just think he's a very non-unique performer that doesn't really bring anything new to the table. I mean, obviously, he doesn't sound bad here per se. He sounds perfectly fine. He doesn't delve into the annoying grunts and just other weird, unnecessary kind of sounds that he decides to randomly make on his more recent releases. But even this, peak of his career in the late '90s, early 2000s, I still do think that he just wasn't really bringing anything to the table that was even remotely all that interesting. And I do think that most of the Marshall Mathers LP relies on strong beats, and while there are some strong beats on this record, I do think that they aren't enough to hold up the album in terms of quality when Eminem himself just really is not an engaging performer, at least for me. Also, I do want to specify that I'm not trying to say that Eminem is indistinguishable from other rappers or anything. He has a very recognizable voice. The way that he chooses to pronounce certain syllables and whatnot does make him a uh, understandably praised as being a unique kind of performer, and he's very recognizable. Of course, there's he wouldn't be able to be the cultural icon that he is if he didn't have a recognizable voice. But at the same time, I just do think his overall delivery and his personality on this album just feels very kind of basic late '90s, early 2000s aggressive rapper kind of style, and that's just not for me because I've heard it too many times for it to be even remotely likable anymore. The main thing that I've always disliked, I should say, about Eminem's early work and his later work, but for very different reasons, is his lyricism. And don't get me wrong, I have no problem with disturbed or dark humor-based lyricism in music, especially rap and hip hop in general are able to really make good use of that style of lyricism, considering songwriting is really put at the forefront in the genre. But I just think that Eminem really just has all the subtlety of a freight train getting an atomic bomb dropped on it, and kind of the lyrical, or I should say, comedic intelligence of a 15-year-old that thinks giving a wholesome award on Reddit to a video of a Mexican cartel execution is the peak of comedy. My point is that Eminem just is incredibly immature, but kind of comes across like he thinks he's sort of reaching the pinnacle of what dark humor and rap can be when he's really just ranges from mildly uncomfortable with tracks like Kim, and that's not in a positive way either, to just downright obnoxious on a lot of tracks. And there are some songs that have some mildly amusing lines here or there, like The Real Slim Shady. But overall, I do think he's just a very obnoxious performer in terms of songwriting. It's not like a fun kind of obnoxious that you would get from other hip hop artists either, like previously mentioned the Beastie Boys. The Beastie Boys were a fun kind of obnoxious. Eminem is just the worst of in-your-face humor, and that's the entire album is almost nothing but in-your-face obnoxious humor. And the other non-humorous moments are just kind of so forgettable that they're not even really worth bringing up. They're not great, but at least they're not as bad as the more humorous parts of the record. But overall, I just think Eminem on both sides of this album are really nothing spectacular and actually can get pretty bad at times depending on what song you choose. Like a lot of other similar hip hop albums, the Marshall Mathers LP has a few just completely unnecessary skits that nobody asked for that I'm pretty sure everybody completely just skips over every time they listen to the album after the first time of giving it a shot. I mean, it's not nearly as drawn out in terms of skits like a lot of other albums. I mean, you've got some really classic albums like, say, 3 Feet High and Rising by De La Soul that just kind of have some pointless skits to them that really kind of go on for longer than is required. But at least the Marshall Mathers LP doesn't really drag things out too much. The skits are just kind of there. They're not really all that funny for the most part, and they just kind of end and it moves on to the next song. It could have been a lot worse, but I would still find it hard to argue that some of the skits on here, like Paul, belong on any album, let alone an album by a really highly praised, highly beloved rapper like Eminem. And I do think the skits are just kind of useless and really just have serve no purpose to the overall progression of the record. Now, while I am not a fan of this album, I think it is wildly overrated. I actually think it's pretty bad for the most part. I will say that it has aged phenomenally. I mean, honestly, it sounds absolutely fantastic, and that's one of the more annoying parts of this record. I want it to sound worse so I can say it's this horrible album with no redeeming qualities, but it sounds really just amazing 20 years on into its legacy. It sounds like it could have come out yesterday thanks to production from both Eminem himself and Dr. Dre, who has obviously just done some of the best production work in hip hop history, really. So even with tracks like, say, Who Knew, I don't think they're particularly good tracks, but I do think that they sound like they came out within the past few years, or maybe even the past couple of months, and not the year 2000. It really does not sound like the datedness that it should have, which is kind of the opposite of the lyrics, which is just kind of like aged like milk, considering this was just a much more ignorant time period for the genre in terms of songwriting. But, sound wise, in terms of how it sounds, I think that this album is probably one of the best aged rap albums of all time. It's really aged like a fine wine over the years. So even if I don't like the album itself, there really is something to be said about how well it has held up and how it has no right to have held up as well as it has. More frustrating than the fact that this album sounds really great, at least in terms of production, is the fact that the Marshall Mathers LP is occasionally just genuinely really good. That mainly comes in the form of the track Stan, which is a classic for a good reason, honestly. It's just a incredibly well-written song. It's got that sort of dark, disturbed storytelling and songwriting I mentioned before. But the thing about that is that it does, well, just that, it's a storytelling song. I kind of sat back and I thought, why is this song so much better than the rest of the songs on the album, to me at least? And then I realized this is, or Stan, I should say, is Eminem sort of taking a break from being in a first person perspective. It's sort of him taking on a more narrative position, and I do think that is something Eminem is much better at. It kind of allows him to take on more serious storytelling instead of just throwing around some like random slurs and dark imagery and then saying here's edgy humor, and it's not, it's just, it doesn't work that way, or it doesn't work well, I should say. But whereas Stan, it does have that sort of darkness, and it does have a little bit of edgy humor to it, maybe a slight bit of self-awareness, but I think overall all of that really works because it's Eminem in a position that he rarely ever takes, and that makes Stan probably one of the best songs of his career and one of the few genuinely great songs of his, in my opinion. So, in conclusion, I'm not an Eminem fan. I don't think the Marshall Mathers LP is a good album by any means, but it probably ranks among the best aged hip hop albums of all time, really. I mean, that's counting 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, and I mean, even now, early 2010s era rap and hip hop. I think that the Marshall Mathers LP is aged beautifully, and it kind of still sounds fresh and new. It just so happens that fresh and new sound is also a sound that I just really cannot get behind. I think that really great production really just hides the fact that Eminem is a strong songwriter but not a good lyricist, if that makes sense. He can write rhymes perfectly, but I mean the humor just kind of completely falls flat. Like I said, the dark humor of this is just aged incredibly poorly. I do think a lot of it comes across as in bad taste anymore, and again, like I said, I have no problem with dark humor in music, and that goes for anything from like the punk of the Misfits to the dark like horrorcore hip hop of whatever artist. I'm cool with all of that stuff. I'm perfectly fine with it. It's just there becomes a point where it's presented as something much more entertaining than it actually is, and that's where it becomes obnoxious. See the Marshall Mathers LP. This is just a record that uses really fantastic production to hide that poor songwriting and lyricism, and Eminem is just a lacking performer overall, in my opinion. And I really just don't think the Marshall Mathers LP adds up to much, which is really kind of weird considering it is considered his best album, and in all honesty, in my opinion, it probably is his best album. it just so happens that I don't think that Eminem has had a very good career at all in general. And with that being said, I'm going to give this album 2.5 stars out of 5. If this album sounded any worse in terms of production, I would have easily given it a 2 out of 5, but it sounds incredibly new. So, yeah, uh, I do think that there are a lot of people that will probably like this, but it just probably, I guess it isn't for me. It's just not my thing, and I think that it just, for the most part, is not very good at all. So, yeah, 2.5 stars out of 5. Now, this is usually the part where, I sign off, and then, I just say, see you guys in the next video and whatnot, but since this is my Rock Hall review series, I do a little bit on the end here where I talk about, one, if they are deserving to get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and two, will they get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and for Eminem, I do think he's kind of a unique performer this year overall. Now, as for does Eminem deserve to get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Now, I'm saying this as a person who is not an Eminem fan. I have only liked a couple of his songs over time. I can't think of a full album I've listened to by him that I've really fully enjoyed beyond actually analyzing it just from a casual experience. I can't think of an album of his I fully just enjoyed. With that being said, he absolutely does deserve to be in. I won't say he is the most deserving rapper that's like on the backlog list right now, but he's probably in the top 3, and he's easily the most commercially successful. I mean, Eminem is just one of the most successful musicians to ever live, and you can't not induct someone as successful as Eminem. But beyond all of the success, I do think that Eminem really has sort of popularized a certain style. While I don't think he's a very unique performer, his sort of unique pronunciation of certain words and syllables has kind of inspired a lot of people, and I do think that he kind of made the whole topic of a white rapper less of a punchline. I mean, obviously it still is, and I mean, come on, rightfully so. I mean, not for nothing, you guys, but I mean, us white people did kind of give the world Vanilla Ice. We probably deserve to be on the butt end of a lot of jokes for that one. But my point is, Eminem was kind of the first one to be really well respected, I would say, or at least one of the first in terms of a mainstream commercial success sense. You've got groups like, the Beastie Boys and Third Base and whatnot that obviously had white members that were very well respected, but just talking critically, I do think that Eminem was the first to truly like break into a massive mainstream audience and actually be taken 100% seriously, at least for the most part, by his fan base and probably by critics for the most part as well. And I mean, really, I do think that that's kind of a thing itself. You could really take it for better or for worse, because you could argue that ultimately resulted in artists like Logic becoming incredibly popular and whatnot in more recent years. And I mean, take that for what you will. If you think that's a good thing, then it's a good thing. If you think it's a bad thing, it's a bad thing. But you can't deny that it has happened. So I will say that Eminem does have a good amount of influence trailing behind him as well. So yeah, as a non-Eminem fan, Eminem absolutely deserves to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now, where Eminem truly becomes a unique nominee isn't so much in if he deserves to be in, but will he get in? Now, on one hand, like I said, Eminem, one of the most successful musicians of all time. However, like I said, there is a lot of very controversial lyrics throughout his career, even in more recent years, especially in his earlier years, like this and the Slim Shady LP, had a lot of lyrics about, the LGBT community and women that are considered, let's just say less agreeable in modern day. So that could definitely be something that sort of holds him back. And even in recent years, with his sort of homophobic insults towards Tyler the Creator, kind of sparked controversy within that same realm when a lot of people sort of assumed that he had moved on from that era of his career. So it's kind of hard to say from that aspect with so much incredibly negative controversy surrounding him and his entire career, especially when these albums are easily his most beloved. But at the same time, first of all, Jay-Z just got in last year, first year eligibility, first year inductee, and that was a big deal because, well, Jay-Z is also another mildly controversial rapper, not nearly as controversial as Eminem, but mildly controversial. Artist that is incredibly successful, one of the most successful musicians of all time again. And I do think that sort of says something about how willing the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is to now recognize rappers, And at the same time, Eminem is still very beloved. I mean, when Rolling Stone just did their top 500 albums of all time list, this album, the Marshall Mathers LP, placed really highly, I think. I think it was in the top 200. I want to say it was like 173, but it might have been higher than that. So my point is, this is still a very cared for album. I also want to say the Slim Shady LP also was listed on that list as well, but I could be wrong. It might have been the older list from like 2011 or 12. But my point is, Eminem is still a highly respected musician, both within the critical realm, the public realm. He's just very well respected overall, and I do think he would make an easy headliner for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ceremony this year if he does get inducted. He probably would be the biggest name that you could make a headliner this year. And it's also unfortunate because I do think between the two hip hop acts that are on the nominee list this year, him and A Tribe Called Quest, Eminem will easily beat A Tribe Called Quest, and they probably won't get in, which is a shame because I have a deep love for A Tribe Called Quest, which I will be talking about later in the series towards the end of things. But my point is, Eminem, he's really like I would say a solid 90 to 95% chance that he'll get inducted. But you've also got to consider that there have been other artists that everyone was like, oh yeah, they're gonna get in first shot, like say a completely different band, but Radiohead. They got nominated for the first time, and I think it was 2019 maybe, and everyone just assumed, yeah, obviously they're gonna get in. They're one of the most important rock bands of the modern era, and then they didn't get in the first try. They got in the second try. So I do think that really is something to consider with Eminem if something like that were to happen a second time, but I personally don't think it is. I think he's going to get in this year. But still, there's always that small possibility that he might not actually get in. And if he doesn't, it'll be interesting to see who ends up headlining. But I do think that for the most part, there's a pretty high chance he's going to get inducted. And overall, I'm pretty much fine with that. So yeah, that's the end of this review and this entry in my Rock Hall review series. This album, Marshall Mathers LP, not my thing. Eminem, not a fan. I give this album 2.5 stars out of 5. Eminem does deserve to be inducted. I think he probably will be inducted, but there's a small chance that controversy that has surrounded him over the years will prevent that, at least on the first try. If he doesn't get in this year, I guarantee you he will get in next year, but I think he'll get in this year. And yeah, this album just, I'm not a huge fan, 2.5 stars. And with that being said, that is the end of this review. Join me in the next entry of this series where I talk about a fairly underrated singer-songwriter from way back in the day, Miss Carly Simon. But until then, I've been Zane, and that is the end of this review. So I'll see you guys in the next one.